child, and I grew up to a single mom. Grew up in church. Every time the doors were open, I was there. I always joke around like I was a poor kid or whatever, but I really wasn't. Like, I played club soccer. I had the things that normal kids had. I didn't really go without. But we definitely lived a little differently than people around us.
I grew up in church. We were having a campaign similar to what we're doing right now. And I remember where I was sitting. I was 18 years old. And I just remember in that moment, the Lord just speaking to me about giving and just that act of obedience. It wasn't something that I had done. My family grew up in church, but it wasn't something that my family did. And I just remember going into that and going into my marriage with Jameson and just being marked by that moment of something that I felt like, hey, I had an encounter with the Lord, and this is something that I want for our family. I would say, when we talk about giving, our first is just the first of what God has given us. And so when we look at our paycheck or anything in our lives, I feel like that we know, hey, this has been a blessing from the Lord. That's our way to honor him, is to give our first in that moment, whether it be, obviously our finances, but sometimes our time and different avenues like that. Our best is honestly just the excellence we feel like God calls us to. So our best in that moment.
So a couple years ago, God was growing us and stretching us and challenging us in our giving. We had gone through financial peace a couple times. I had taught financial peace once at my last church, and we just seen lots of blessings of our finances through raises, promotions in my life, in Ashley's life, and a goal we set out. We had just moved into a house a few years before, and it was a new house that we built, and I said, hey, would it be nuts? Would it be crazy if the biggest check we wrote every month was our tithe? Like, what would that look like? Could we do that? Could we get there? And after a while and working at that, it eventually got to that point, and we operated like that for a couple of years. And then it was normal, and it was just like, hey, this is like breathing in and out. We didn't think anything of it. And then, last October, when Ashley's lost her job and our world kind of got shaken and turned upside down, we committed to keep tithing and tithing off what I was making, knowing full well what we wanted the goal to be. And that formed a lot of things. That formed the cars we would drive, that informed the kind of houses we would live in, it informed a lot of our decisions to make that commitment. And what was really cool is this last week, she started making regular income and a normal payroll period that I was able to go back in and change it. And I was like, here we are back to where we were and then some,
I remember in that moment just feeling so much stress and anxiety of what does this look like for our family? And a couple days went by, and I just remember telling my friend, I have this overwhelming peace.
Just because there was unknown and we didn't know what was next, we had faith in her and this new team and this new company she created. We knew, like, hey, if we were going to bet on something, we're going to bet on them being successful, and God's going to take care of us.
We'd been here in our marriage. We've seen how God provided for our family time and time and time and time again. And so it wasn't a matter of, is he going to be here? Is he going to get us through? It was hey, we know our God will, because he has. And I think that has been just what we have seen him do in our own giving journey.
When I think of God stretching me, I think about like Spider-Man, like old Peter Parker, to whom much is given, much is required. Like, when God gives you more, he will require more. And I feel like we've been given a lot, and that's scary to think he's going to ask more.
So I think obedience is hard. I think when you think about your finances, it's a tangible thing. And I think, if as you're giving, that can be very scary. And I remember just thinking so many times, how is this going to work? It doesn't work. It doesn't work in our budget. These numbers aren't, I hate math, but I can add numbers up and think this is not going to work. And so I remember how scary it was.
I mean, for me, it's hard for me not to relate it to the season I'm in. When I think of obedience, I've got a 12-year-old, and, by all intents and purposes, she looks like a young woman now. But I tell her, I was like, hey, you may look like a young woman, but you're 12. You don't have all the things figured out. And I'm going to tell you to do some things sometimes. And you're just going to have to trust me that I've walked this path before, and I'm trying to save you from mistakes. And I know you're 12, and I know you have it all figured out at this point. But I was 12 once too, and now I'm like 3 times your age. And I just don't want you to make the same mistakes I did. And so for me, obedience is trusting God that he's walked this out and he knows my path. And he's just trying to save me from the heartache that I could bring upon myself with disobedience.